Another day, another story. A team of real-life treasure hunters recently set out to uncover something that had been lost years ago. Their goal? Unearth something that had been lost since the Cold War. Back in the 1950s, the Canadian government eagerly sought to destroy any trace of this object's existence. Despite their attempts, the item was found still intact, sitting at the bottom of Lake Ontario. This is the story of the object and the people who found it. They didn't know if they'd find it in August 2017. A team of Canadian researchers at OEX Recovery Group Incorporated decided to go look for something they'd heard might have been lost years ago in Lake Ontario. Project Raise the Arrow was born, its purpose being to find whatever valuables lay at the bottom of Lake Ontario. The plan was to search some areas that were likely to have the object in question. With a lot of money on the line, the team gambled losing their funding if they couldn't recover it in time. They looked to decades-old stories told by locals. Locals knew they'd seen something while the search team needed to take measures to expedite a seemingly overwhelming process. They weren't exactly clear what they were dealing with. All that they knew for certain was that in 1950 some locals had seen an object vanish into the lake. Tales about the mysterious lake object stirred amongst Ontario locals until the team finally caught wind and decided to hunt the item down. Trying their best to deduce what the object might be based on locals' age-old accounts was a difficult feat. The sweet spot, according to locals, the landing point for the mysterious object was somewhere around Point Petra. A part of Prince Edward County in the Ontario province, the spot is a favorite amongst tourists. The wildlife conservation spot boasts beautiful scenery and is a birding hotspot. Nature lovers particularly enjoy coming to this spot for its incredible rock formations and crystal clear water. On the weekends, visitors can enjoy camping along the waterline and warming up to a campfire. Next, how technology could help them in the search. New technology keeps getting smaller. Thunderfish, pictured above, is a mini submarine that is operated remotely. A sonar device within the submarine captures high-resolution images. These images greatly aided the team in their quest for an underwater missing object. Underwater objects have brewed some pretty interesting rumors in the area. Back into 2013, rumors spread about an alien-run base existing at the bottom of Lake Ontario. The team wasn't there to check on alien presence. Instead, they were out to solve a decades-old mystery. Lake Ontario is multinational. Lake Ontario is so huge that it has shoreline in both the US and Canada, and is the 5th largest lake in North America and the 14th largest in the world. New York State falls on its eastern and southern shores. The lake covers about 7,500 square miles and is about 280 feet deep. The lake boasts over 100 beaches. It is too big to ever fully freeze, though its surface has frozen over at least 5 times according to Lake Ontario Waterkeeper. How old is the lake? The lake dates back to these times around 11,000 years ago. The Ice Age was nearing its end. At that time, the Laurentide Glacier that once covered all of Canada melted into Lake Iroquois. As the melting continued, water began to rush into the Atlantic Ocean. As the rocks and islands beneath the gigantic lake settled, and more water poured into the Atlantic, the formation of the lake and its surrounding land began to form, leaving behind the Lake Ontario we know today. The search crew discovered something. Given the lake's great enormity, this team knew what they were up against. The thrill of discovering that Thunderfish had picked up on something was immense. Looking closely at the images that the sonar sent back, they realized what it had found at last. The object was a lost miniature prototype of a 1950s aircraft. After being lost, engineers never replicated the object. Completely submerged by the water, scientists had no clues in which to find the now 60-year-old figure. Later on, we'll take a look at the first underwater images captured from the abandoned aircraft. It all began in 1946. The prototype that crashed had serious potential during the Cold War years. The Canadian government sought to develop a supremely destructive jet fighter. This prototype was one for a plane that could lead the Canadian military, who had been allied with the United States against the communist states of Russia. Meanwhile, the Soviets were building aircraft that could fly over the Arctic towards the US and Canada. The jet fighter was their defense against looming airborne strikes. Up next, the company responsible for creating the countermeasure to Russia's planned aircraft. AV Rose Plant creates Clunk. The Canada firm Avro Canada, aka AV Ro Canada, were tasked with building an aircraft as a response to planes being worked on by Russia. Workers put together the Avro CF-100 Canuck, nicknamed Clunk. When Canuck launched, the Canadian Air Force was already developing its successor. The RCAF put together a report on how to improve the Canuck, birthing a plan for what would become the Avro Canada CF-105 Aero, a plane that could fly at 50,000 feet at the speed of 1,500 miles per hour. Launching tests happened here between 1953 and 1957. 9 prototypes of the Avro Aero were created. One of the notable features of the Aero was its large, triangular-shaped wings. These delta wings were new at the time and were constructed to enable the craft to surpass the speed of sound. The prototypes were about 10 feet long with nearly a 7-foot wingspan. Built to run on solid fuel, the prototypes were launched from Point Petra near, you guessed it, Lake Ontario. It didn't take long to realize the aircraft wasn't what it promised. Not such a big deal after all. After initial tests, engineers added a tail cone and modified its wings and nose. Once tests were passed, bootling of the actual sized craft began in 1955. In October 1957, a model of the Avro Aero was launched. Around the same time, October 4, 1957 to be exact, the Russians took the lead in the space race, coming up with Sputnik 1. The satellite was the first to orbit the Earth, shocking the world with its success. Worse, the RCAF project on Avro Aero was completely dropped by 1959. Thanks for watching.